Hello everyone, and welcome back to Yusuf Reacts. Today, we're taking a trip back to the start of the James Bond legacy with Dr. No from 1962. This film introduced us to the suave, clever, and iconic British spy James Bond, played by Sean Connery. So, grab your martini-chicken, not steered and let's dive into the world of 007. Dr. No was the first Bond film adapted from Ian Fleming's novels. And it set the tone for everything we know and love about the franchise today. Action, espionage, gadgets, and of course, unforgettable villains. Let's look at how it all began. The film kicks off with Bond being sent on a mission to Jamaica to investigate the mysterious disappearance of a fellow British agent. Little does he know, he's about to face off with Dr. Julius No, a genius scientist and one of the first classic Bond villains. Bond teams up with some local allies, including CIA agent Felix Leiter and a Jamaican fisherman named Coral. Together, they uncover a sinister plot on a nearby island, Crab Key, where Dr. No is using a massive reactor to disrupt U.S. missile tests. And then, we meet Honey Ryder, played by Ursula Andress. Her entrance scene, emerging from the ocean in a white bikini, became one of the most iconic shots in cinematic history. Honey Ryder was strong and independent, and she brought a unique dynamic to the Bond girl archetype. She joins Bond on his mission, adding a blend of charm and vulnerability to the story as they navigate Dr. No's dangerous lair. Now let's talk about the main villain, Dr. No himself, played by Joseph Wiseman. Dr. No is a classic Bond villain. He's cold, calculating, and he even has those iconic metal hands due to a botched experiment. Dr. No's goal? To cause chaos between the U.S. and Russia by disrupting missile tests, a plot that feels very Cold War era. He's one of the franchise's earliest villains with a grand scheme, setting the tone for future Bond adversaries. For an early 60s film, Dr. No still has some great action sequences. We see Bond's resourcefulness, no high-tech gadgets yet, just quick thinking and charm. Sean Connery brought a mix of class and danger to the role that made Bond instantly iconic. And let's not forget Bond's classic one-liners. From his signature introduction Bond, James Bond to his unflinching confidence, Connery made Bond feel like the ultimate spy. Dr. No laid the groundwork for an entire franchise. The success of this film led to a sequel, From Russia with Love, and the start of what would become one of the most famous film series in history. It also set the stage for Bond's evolving style, tropes, and memorable themes, like the unforgettable Bond theme by Monty Norman. A resourceful British government agent seeks answers in a case involving the disappearance of a colleague and the disruption of the American space program. James Bond 007 is Britain's top agent, and is on an exciting mission to solve the mysterious murder of a fellow agent. The task sends him to Jamaica, where he joins forces with Coral and a loyal CIA agent, Felix Leiter, while dodging tarantulas, fire-breathing dragons, and a trio of assassins, known as the Three Blind Mice. Bond meets up with the beautiful Honey Ryder and goes face-to-face with the evil Dr. No. John Strangway's Timothy Moxon, the station chief of Mi-6 in Jamaica, is murdered by a trio of assassins, the Three Blind Mice. Along with his secretary, before his home is ransacked, the assassins steal the files on Crab Key Island and Dr. No. When news of Strangway's disappearance reaches Bernard Lee, the head of Mi-6, he assigns agent James Bond Sean Connery to investigate the matter and determine if it is related to Strangway's cooperation with the CIA on a case involving the disruption of rocket launches from Cape Canaveral by radio jamming. Miss Moneypenny Lois Maxwell, the secretary to M. Major Boothroyd Peter Burton, the head of Q Branch. Boothroyd is brought in by M to replace Bond's Beretta M1934 with a Walther PPAK. When Bond arrives in Jamaica, he is accosted by a man claiming to be a chauffeur sent to collect him, but is really an enemy agent sent to kill him. Before Bond can interrogate him, the agent kills himself with a cyanide capsule disguised as a cigarette. After visiting Strangway's house, Bond confronts a boatman that Strangways was acquainted with. Bond saw a photo of Strangways with the boatman fishing in the local waters. Plus, Strangway's bridge partners also tell Bond that he was obsessed with fishing for the last 3 weeks and went daily with a particular boatman. The boatman, named Coral John Kitzmiller, reveals that he is aiding the CIA and introduces Bond to their agent Felix Leiter Jack Lord, a CIA operative sent to liaise with James Bond while he is in Kingston, who is also investigating Strangway's disappearance. Bond learns from Felix that the CIA traced the radio jamming signal to Jamaica, and that Strangways was helping to pinpoint its exact origin. Coral reveals that before Strangways disappeared, the pair collected mineral samples from an island called Crab Key. The boats are not allowed to go there as it is a private island owned by a Chinese guy by the name of Dr. No with a bauxite mine. Upon finding a receipt from a local geologist, Professor R. J. Dent Anthony Dawson, a geologist with a practice in Kingston, who also secretly works for Dr. No in Strangway's house, Bond makes inquiries with him about the samples in Crab Key, but is suspicious of his answers when he claims the samples checked out as normal. Following the meeting, Dent hurriedly travels to Crab Key to meet its reclusive owner, for whom he works, to inform him of Bond's visit. Under strict instructions, Dent attempts to have Bond killed with a tarantula. However, Bond kills the spider and survives. Miss Terozina Marshall, the secretary to Mr. Pladle Smith Lewis Blazer, chief secretary at Government House in Kingston. She is actually a double agent working for Dr. No. She seduces Bond on his visit to Pladle and invites him to her cabin in the mountains. On the way, there was another attack on Bond by the 3 blind mice, but Bond is able to defeat them and they fall to their deaths. Taro is shocked to see Bond at her doorstep and calls someone to say that she will keep Bond at her place. Bond overhears and has Taro arrested. Bond waits and finds that the mystery call recipient was Dent himself. When the geologist arrives, Bond holds him at gunpoint, revealing that he believed Dent was asked to check Strangway's samples to see if they were radioactive, before killing him. After checking Coral's boat with a Geiger counter, Bond determines that Strangways must have suspected that the radio jamming was coming from Crab Key, and so convinces Coral to take him out there. The following day, after arriving, Bond meets Honey Ryder, a shell diver Ursula Andress. Honey visits the island after the death of her father, who was a researcher and used to visit Crab Island to catch seashells for his work. She is not convinced that his death was an accident as he was an expert diver. When armed men arrive on the island, Bond and Coral take Ryder with them and escape into the swamp. At nightfall, the group encounter a flamethrower-equipped tank disguised as a dragon to deter locals, which incinerates Coral. Bond and Ryder are kidnapped and taken to a hidden base, whereupon they are swiftly put into decontamination due to the swamp being contaminated with radiation. After being led to private quarters set up for them, they are rendered unconscious with drugged coffee. Upon awakening, the pair are escorted to dine with the base's owner, Dr. No Joseph Wiseman, a Chinese-German criminal scientist who has prosthetic metal hands due to radiation exposure. Bond learns that Dr. No was a former member of a Chinese crime tong until he stole $10 million in gold, and now works for the secret organization Spectre Special Executive for counterintelligence, terrorism, revenge, and extortion. Dr. No wanted to join the Gov against criminals, but he was rejected and now he works as a criminal himself, wanting Govs to pay for their lack of vision. The radio jamming being conducted by Dr. No is being planned to disrupt the Project Mercury space launch at Cape Canaveral using a radio beam, which he states will be a demonstration of Spectre's power. When Bond refuses to join Spectre, Dr. No has Ryder taken away and Bond imprisoned. However, Bond manages to escape his cell through an air vent and disguises himself as a worker, before infiltrating the base's control center. Bond discovers that the radio beam being prepared to disrupt the launch is powered by a nuclear pool reactor, and overloads it as the launch commences. Dr. No attempts to stop him but falls into the reactor pool and is killed. As the base's personnel evacuate, Bond frees Ryder before the two escape the island by boat, moments before the base is destroyed. Felix finds the pair adrift at sea after their boat runs out of fuel, and has them towed to safety by a Royal Navy ship. However, as Ryder passionately kisses him, Bond lets go of the tow rope to embrace her. This movie was a breakthrough in action films, and it's amazing to see how it still holds up today. If you're a Bond fan or new to the series, Dr. No is a must-watch to understand where it all began. Thanks for joining me on this journey through Bond history. What do you think of Dr. No? Does it still live up to the Bond legacy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more classic film reviews. Until next time, this is Jane signing off, shaken, not stirred.